Okay. Well, I'm going to start sharing my screen with everyone as we do this for a good reason. I was given some advice and told about how this kind of works, and it's very interesting. But if somebody's just looking at your face or your background, or they will become their thoughts will then begin to lean towards judging the individual that they're looking at and trying to figure out what that person is about and what kind of person they might be, and then trying to come to some sort of conclusion about where they live or how much they have, or how spiritual they could be, or this and that. So the goal is to start out with going straight up to the mental plane, skipping over the astral, and staying on the mental plane. So with that being said, I'm gonna take that advice, this concept that I heard, and I'm gonna stick to that from now on in most of these videos. We'll see how this goes. But today we're on the glamour of sentiment. Sentiment. We just did the glamour of materiality, and we're going to try to see how much of this we can get done. I have to leave in a little bit, but I want to do some, and then maybe we'll come back and I'll do another video later. So we'll see. The glamour of sentiment holds the good people of the world in thrall and in a dense fog of emotional reactions. The race has reached a point wherein the men of good intention, of some real understanding, and owning a measure of freedom from the love of gold, a symbolic way of speaking of the glamour of materiality, are turning their desire to their duty, their responsibilities, their effects upon others, and to their sentimental understanding of the nature of love. Love, for many people, for the majority indeed, is not really love, but a mixture of desire to love and desire to be loved, plus a willingness to do anything to show and evoke this sentiment, and consequently to be more comfortable in one's own interior life. The selfishness of the people who are desirous of being unselfish is great. So many contributing sentiments gather around the sentiment or desire to show those amiable and pleasant characteristics, which will evoke a corresponding reciprocation towards the would-be lover or server who is still completely surrounded by the glamour of sentiment. You can see this is rather simple to see. Let's just keep going. It seems rather simple to see. I mean, there is a lot of this going on in the world, and it's another trap. Let's put it that way. It is this pseudo love based primarily on a theory of love and service, which characterizes so many human relationships, such as those existing, for instance, between husband and wife, parents and their children, glamored by their sentiment for them and knowing little of the love of the soul, which is free itself and leaves others free also. They wander in a dense fog, often dragging with them the ones they desire to serve in order to draw forth a responsive affection. Study the word affection, my brother, and see its true meaning. Affection is not love. It is that desire which we express through an exertion of the astral body, and this activity affects our contacts. It is not the spontaneous desirelessness of the soul, which asks nothing for the separated self. This glamour of sentiment imprisons and bewilders all the nice people in the world, imposing upon them obligations which do not exist, and producing the glamour which eventually, must eventually be dissipated by the pouring in of true and selfless love. I am but touching with brevity upon these glamours, for each of you can elaborate them for yourselves, and in so doing, will discover where you stand in the world of fog and glamour. Thus, with knowledge, you can begin to free yourselves from the glamour of the world. I find that to be absolutely true as well. The more decay and the more these books are highlighting this for us, the more opportunity we have to dissipate this, see it for ourselves, and then, rid ourselves of it. I want to say, the glamour of devotion, which we're about to start talking about, is likely to be somewhat similar. Sounds quite sixth grade to me. I don't know, what we'll see. Or so did sentiment, which, these are very, it seems to me to be astral. This is very astral. And that's what we're talking about, is glamour on the astral plane right now. So yes, of course. The glamour of devotion causes many probationary disciples to wander circuitously around in the world of desire. This is primarily a glamour which affects sixth-ray persons and is particularly potent at this time owing to the age-long activity of the sixth ray of devotion during the rapidly passing Piscean age. It is today one of the potent glamours of the really devoted aspirant. They are devoted to a cause, to a teacher, to a creed, to a person, to a duty, or to a responsibility. Ponder on this. This harmless desire along some line of idealism which confronts them becomes definitely harmful, both to themselves and to others, because through this glamour of devotion, they swing into the rhythm of the world glamour, which is essentially the fog of desire. Potent desire along any line, when it obliterates the wider vision and shuts a man within a tiny circle of his own desire to satisfy his sentiment of devotion, is just as hampering as any of the other glamours, and is even more dangerous because of the beautiful coloring which the resultant fog takes on. A man gets lost in a rapturous mist of his own making, which emanates from his astral body and which is composed of the sentimentalizing of his own nature about his own desire and devotion to the object of his attracted attention. And I think we're all subject to this, right? Initially, certainly. We all go through this. When we first get on the path, we're ready to devote our lives to something fanatically, I want to say. And that energy takes time to settle. With all true aspirants, owing to the increased potency of their vibration, this devotional sentiment can be particularly difficult and bring about a lengthy imprisonment. It certainly can. If we don't proceed if we don't move fast enough through it, I want to say, we can get stuck. It's like getting through the mud. If you don't have that momentum built up, you could risk getting stuck. And then once you're stuck, who knows how long you would end up there. One illustration of this is the sentiment of devotion poured out in a glamorous ecstasy by probationary disciples upon the masters of the wisdom. Around the names of the members of the hierarchy and around their work and the work of the initiates and the disciplined disciples, mark that phrase, a rich glamour is created which prevents them ever from reaching the disciple or his reaching them. So this glamour is that we created, this illusion, this glamour, this fog and mist, is actually preventing you from reaching your goal and those on the other side from reaching their goal of helping you. It's creating your own, you built your own wall. We've built our own wall at this point. It is not possible to penetrate the dense glamour of devotion, vibrating with dynamic, ecstatic life, which emanates from the concentrated energy of the disciple working through the solar plexus center. For this glamour, there are some age-old rules. Contact the greater self through the medium of the higher self, and thus lose sight of the little self, its reactions, its desires, and intentions, or the pure love of the soul, which is not personalized in any way and which seeks no recognition, can then pour into the world of glamour which surrounds the devotee, and the mists of his devotion will melt away. The mist of his devotion, upon which he prides himself, will melt away. And this is often called, this devotional yoga, or, it's called bhakti. And it works. Instead of avoiding it, they will go into it for a time. And this is devotion to a guru. This is very common in India and other places. It's common. And it's seen by a lot of us because, we want to almost idolize somebody who has more spiritual knowledge, energy, wisdom, who've achieved higher realms than we have. So it becomes, we become attached to that, and they know what's happening. The teachers know that. So there's one of two things at that point. You can either be taken advantage of by somebody, or you can be guided through that phase with love and care, as many of the gurus in the East have done when they're selfless. So, but this is not for us. It's not for the occultists. It's not for the one who's, experimenting and moving and growing inclusively. We've gotten past this stage at this point, is what I mean by that. Likely, or we are moving past that stage. For this glamour, there are some age-old rules. Okay, we already did that, sorry. Upon the probationary path, there comes the swing, consciously registered between the pairs of opposites until the middle way is sighted and emerges. This activity produces the glamour of the pairs of opposites, which is a dense and foggy nature, sometimes colored with joy and bliss, and sometimes colored with gloom and depression, as the disciple swings back and forth between the dualities. This condition persists just as long as the emphasis is laid upon feeling, which feeling will run the gamut between a potent joyfulness as the man seeks to identify himself with the objects of his devotion or aspiration, or fails to do so and therefore succumbs to the blackest despair sense of failure. All this is, however, astral in nature and sensuous in quality, and is not of the soul at all. Aspirants remain for many years and sometimes for many lives imprisoned by this glamour. Release from the world of feeling and the polarizing of the disciple in the world of the illumined mind, release from the world of feeling and the polarizing of the disciple in the world of the illumined mind will dissipate this glamour, which is part of the great heresy of separateness. The moment a man differentiates his life into triplicities, and he inevitably must as he deals with the pairs of opposites and identifies himself with one of them, he succumbs to the glamour of separation. Perhaps this point of view may add, or perhaps it will remain a mystery, for the secret of world glamour lies hid in the thought that this triple differentiation veils the secret of creation. God himself produces the pairs of opposite spirit and matter, and also produced the middle way, which is that of the consciousness aspect or the soul aspect. Ponder deeply upon this thought. The triplicity of the pairs of opposites and of the narrow way of balance between them, the noble middle path, is the reflection on the astral plane of the activity of spirit, soul, and body, of life, consciousness, and form, the three aspects of divinity, all of them equally divine. As the aspirant learns to free himself from the glamours upon which we have touched, he discovers another world of fog and mist through which the path seems to run and through which he must penetrate and thus free himself from the glamours of the path. What are these glamours, my brothers? Study the three temptations of Jesus if you would know clearly what they are. Study the effect that the affirmation schools, which emphasize divinity, materially employed, have upon the thought of the world. Study the failures of disciples through pride, the world savior complex, the Treatise complex, and all the various distortions of reality which a man encounters upon the path, which hinder his progress and which spoils the service to others which he should be rendering. Emphasize in your own minds the spontaneity of the life of the soul and spoil it not with the glamour of high aspiration, selfishly interpreted, self-centeredness, self-immolation, self-aggressiveness, self-assertiveness in spiritual work, and such are some of the glamours of the path. So really, she's saying, emphasize in your own mind the spontaneity of the life of the soul and spoil it not. And that really just, to me, that's saying, be here now, right? Be present, be the observer, be watching these events unfold. Don't attach yourself to the unfolding. You're not really doing it. We have been tricked into believing that we are doing it. If you have any question regarding that and the level of free will offered to us here, I would consider a study of your personal astrology. It can really dissipate a lot of glamours rather quickly. Next, we will consider glamour on the etheric plane and the theme of the dweller upon the threshold, and thus complete the brief outline of our problem, which the first part of this teaching was intended to convey. And this teaching is just an absolute, it's like dropping a bomb, if you ask me. In combination with the Treatise on White Magic, for this portion of the path, this is huge. Before taking up this subject in detail, I would like to add something to our previous consideration of the problem of glamour. In your last instruction, I elaborated somewhat upon the subject of the various types of glamour, and left with you the concept of their great importance in your individual lives. The battlefield for the man who is nearing accepted discipleship, or who is upon the path of discipleship in the academic sense, is primarily that of glamour. That is the major problem, and its solution is imminent and urgent for all disciples and senior aspirants. It will be apparent, therefore, to you why the emphasis has been put during the Aryan Age upon the necessity for a study of Raja Yoga and the cultivation of submission to its discipline. Only through Raja Yoga can a man stand steady in the light, and only through illumination and the achievement of clear vision can the fogs and miasmas of glamour be finally dissipated. Only as the disciple learns to hold his mind steady in the light and as the rays of pure light stream forth from the soul can the glamour be discovered, discerned, recognized for what it is essentially, for what it essentially is, and thus be made to disappear as the mists of the earth dissolve in the rays of the rising sun. Therefore, I would counsel you to pay more adequate attention to your meditation, cultivating ever the ability to reflect and to assume the attitude of reflection held steady throughout the day. You would find it of real value to ponder deeply upon the purposes for which the intuition must be cultivated and the illumined mind developed, asking yourselves if those purposes are identical and objective and synchronous in time. Well, he asked us to ponder on that. He said that we should ponder on that. And I do believe that does make sense, because it's just in the couple of seconds that I had there to think about that. That's very deep. You would then discover that their objectives differ and the effects of their pronounced unfoldment upon the personality life are likewise different. Glamour is not dispelled through the means of the intuition, nor is illusion overcome by the use of the illumined mind. The intuition is a higher power than its mind and is a faculty latent in the spiritual triad. It is the power of pure reason, an expression of the Buddhic principle, and lies beyond the world of the ego and of form. Only when a man is an initiate can the exercise of the true intuition become normally possible. By that I mean that the intuition will then be as easily operative as is the mind principle in the case of an actively intelligent person. The intuition, however, will make its presence felt much earlier in extremity or on urgent demand. It is illumination that the majority of aspirants, such as are found in this group, must seek, and they must cultivate the power to use the mind as a reflector of soul light, turning it upon the levels of glamour, and therefore dissipating it. The difficulty, my brothers, is to do so when in the midst of the agonies and deceptions of glamour. It requires a quiet withdrawing in the mind and thought and desire from the world in which the personality habitually works, and the centering of the consciousness in the world of the soul. There silently and patiently to await developments, knowing that the light will shine forth and illumination eventually take place. A deep distrust of one's reactions to life and circumstance, and such reactions awaken and call forth criticism, separateness, or pride, is of value. A deep distrust of one's reactions to life and circumstance, when such reactions awaken and call forth criticism, separateness, or pride, is of value. So we're just being aware of ourselves here. The qualities enumerated above are definitely breeders of glamour. They are occultly the glamorous characteristics: criticism, separativeness, or pride. Ponder on this. If a man can free himself from these three characteristics, he is well on the way to the relinquishing and the dissipation of all glamour. I am choosing my words with care in an effort to arrest your attention. Illusion is dispelled, rejected, and thrust away through the conscious use of the intuition. The initiate insulates himself from the world of illusion and the illusory forms and from the attractive urges of a personality nature, and thereby, through the medium of isolation, comes into touch with the reality in all forms, hidden hitherto by the veil of illusion. This is one of the paradoxes of the path. Insulation and isolation of the right kind lead to the right relationships and the correct contacts with the real. They produce eventual identification with reality through insulation of oneself against the unreal. It is this idea which lies behind the teaching given in the last book in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. These have often been misinterpreted and their meaning twisted into a plea for the wrong kind of isolation by those with separative tendencies and for selfish ends. It is the soul itself which dispels illusion through the use of the faculty of the intuition. It is the illumined mind which dissipates glamour. So it's just, we're coming down, we're coming over the top of each other there, if that makes sense. I would like here to point out that many well-meaning aspirants fail at this point due to two errors. One, they omit to discriminate between illusion and glamour, and they endeavor to dispel glamour through what they believe to be right method by calling in the soul, whereas they really need to use the mind correctly. When one is in the midst of fogs and glamours, however, it is much easier to sit down and hypnotize oneself into belief that one is calling in the soul than it is to subject one's astral and emotional nature to the effect of hard, straight thinking, using the mind as the instrument whereby glamour can be dispelled. Strange as it may seem, the calling in of the soul to deal directly with glamour may, and frequently does, lead to an intensification of the difficulty. The mind is the means whereby light can be brought to bear on all conditions of glamour. The student would do well to bear this thought constantly in their consciousness. The students would do well. The process is one of linking up the mind with the soul and then focusing oneself consciously and with precision in the mind nature or in the mental body and not in the soul nature or the egoic form. Then through analysis, discrimination, and right thought, one proceeds to deal with the problem of glamour. The problem is that disciples often do not recognize the condition as one of glamour, and it is difficult to give a clear and infallible rule whereby that recognition can come. It might be stated, however, that glamour can always be found where there exists criticism, when careful analysis would show that no criticism is really warranted, criticism where there is no personal responsibility involved, and by that I mean where it is not the place or the duty of the man to criticize. That's interesting. Pride in achievement or satisfaction that one is a disciple, and any sense of superiority or separative tendency. So there you have it. This is really what we're looking for here is ways to gauge these things. And after having read it, and then now we can do that with these. So that's great. Many other clues to a right recognition of glamour might be given, but if all of you would pay close attention to the above four suggestions, you would release your lives most perceptibly from the influence of glamour and be of greater service consequently to your fellow men. I have endeavored to give you here some practical assistance in this difficult battle between the pairs of opposites, which is the major cause of glamour. All right, now that's great. That was a great section there. We got some useful advice and guidance. We need to be watching ourselves as if we're criticizing and if we're holding on to some levels of pride somewhere, and any sense of superiority or separative tendency. We're in the process of losing ourselves. So any place that you find that you're holding on, it should, it can become more obvious by looking at this and really just through awareness. conscious awareness is always seems to be the answer. It's always a lack thereof, and the fix is always more of it. I don't listen to me if I don't know that that's actually true. That just came from the top of my head. It seems to be the case for me. Seems to be rather accurate. I'm just talking. Listen to yourself. Okay, well, great. Have a good day, and we'll get back at this again real soon. All right. Have a good one.